Jonathan, you've done quite a bit of work around utility policies in states like Washington and Oregon. Can you just teach our audience, just from the outset, what does the production of energy for the utilities of those two states look like today? Where does that sit? Again, I live in the state of Arizona. We don't have much water, so we biasly think, oh, there's a ton of water in the Northwest. That must be where they get most of their energy. Can you teach us about what the current production makeup is?
Sure. The current makeup is, it's a fair amount of hydro thanks to the development of the federal electric hydro power system on the Columbia River. Then it's natural gas. There's a little bit of nuclear, less than there used to be. And there's still one coal plant in Washington State, which is going to close next year. And some of the utilities also receive import power, primarily coal, from Wyoming, Nevada. So that's the mix today.
Okay. And your work has been tied to, obviously, the, I'll call it the mandates, that's how I think about it, this idea of net zero, okay? If that's the state of affairs today, where would be the plans to go to in those energy production, means to get the electricity, mandates of the future in this net zero idea?
Well, both Oregon and Washington have numerous mandates. Both are requiring the electric utilities in their respective states to be zero emissions in 2040 in Oregon, 2045 in Washington State. Both have implemented California's advanced clean car rules, which kick in next year and will require 35% of all new vehicles sold in the states to be electric next year. That increases to 82% by 2032 and 100% by 2035. There's also similar regulations for large trucks. Then they're also requiring electrification of buildings. Oregon has mandated that no new buildings can have natural gas installed. In Washington, they haven't passed any laws, but they've changed the building code, so it's effectively impossible to install natural gas. They're also, in Washington State, they've implemented a carbon tax. They call it misleadingly cap and invest. It's really a cap and trade program, where it's raised about $2 billion so far. Oregon would have passed that same sort of cap and trade system, except the Oregon Republicans walked out of the legislature. This was last year. And so they didn't have a quorum to pass that. So, and then there's some advanced clean fuels initiatives, which require that the carbon content of fossil fuels be reduced. For those of you who are chemists, you might wonder, well, how can you reduce the carbon content of fossil fuels? Because that's basically in the chemistry. It basically involves buying credits to offset the carbon in those fuels. And again, the goal is to go full 100% electrification by 2050 and meet the needs, the demand for electricity, which will obviously skyrocket with wind, solar, and storage.
So in comparison in Arizona, can you give us a picture of what that looks like today? Because I read the New York Times and I trust everything they say. I know you have no water there, okay? And so could you kind of teach us, if you don't have water, you're not doing hydro, how do you get, power in a desert?
Yeah, absolutely. Kent Walter from Arizona. The desert is an interesting place to have power because we don't have a lot of these natural things. We don't have natural gas that we have locally. We get our natural gas from Texas and New Mexico, and we bring that in. We have a lot of sunshine, and we have kind of the gem of the desert, which is Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station, which we are the operator of. We have a balanced portfolio of resources. So at the end of the day, utilities are risk managers. We will have to make sure our customers are reliable at the lowest cost possible. And to do that requires a lot of different diverse resources. So our mix includes quite a bit of nuclear energy. So 20% of our energy comes from nuclear, 25% from natural gas, 15% from coal, and then the balance from renewables, purchase power, and demand side management. Now, what's interesting is you hear me talk about the percentages of energy, but as a utility planner and as a risk manager, we don't just think about where our energy comes from. We have to think about where our reliability comes from. And so when we think about our reliability, we think about where our kind of peak needs come from, because when it's 118 degrees in in Arizona, it's a life and death issue for our customers that we stay reliable. And so our portfolio looks really different, where we're the majority natural gas for our reliability for our customers, as compared to the things that we've mentioned that are meeting some of our energy needs.
So you mentioned nuclear. Obviously, nuclear is like the new cool kids thing to talk about for energy and all that kind of stuff. Mark, you were just, it's kind of on that topic. When I think of nuclear, I think of Homer Simpson, obviously, is the most famous candid example of nuclear, which is actually based on the Columbia River, the nuclear stations that were off the Columbia River. Mark, you came here for ultimately nuclear as a Canadian coming across the border. This heightened interest in nuclear, how do you see this? Because it obviously requires a lot of capital investment, depending on what we do, and then also efficiencies and technologies. Can you kind of talk to us about where you see nuclear going? Because ultimately, it's been this thing, around, commented earlier, it's been around for years, and yet it's still highly debated. I mean, just as an example, I think Japan had 53 nuclear reactors, and then Fukushima happens, and they go down to, I think, 3. So kind of in the pendulum swing of nuclear.
Well, everybody's excited about nukes. It's the cool kid thing, especially in my friends in the tech community. Everybody's clapping like seals in the Embarcadero about nuclear energy now, about we're going to run our data centers on nukes. I'm delighted that the tech industry is throwing billions of dollars at nuclear energy. It needs money. I'm glad it's going to be their money, not taxpayers' money. So I'd like the tech industry to fund it, not DOE, which funds yesterday's technologies, not tomorrow's. But to answer your question, I do want to answer George's question because it's relevant. George said, "What is Jevons Paradox?" And it is very relevant to the answer, because William Stanley Jevons, a 19th century British economist, coined a phrase that he knew was not a paradox to describe what good economists do when they discover the obvious. And it happens occasionally with economists. I mean, it doesn't happen very often. I'm a physicist, and I like to think that economists episodically discover fundamental laws. What Jevons discovered was that if you make it more efficient to produce something that's valuable, people will consume more of it. What a shock. So what he wrote in his paper in the 19th century was that the paradox was, and his words were exactly this. You can still find the paper online. It's in a PDF. He wrote that it may seem a paradox that as we improve the efficiency of coal mining and coal combustion, that the consumption of coal will go up. And of course, he went on to point out that it made the service it provided cheaper. So efficiency drives demand, with very, very few exceptions, because it lowers costs, inputs go down. This is relevance to the demand for electricity, the demand for energy in general. Certainly the question that was posed in a previous session about what happens as we improve the efficiency of compute, going from chips to tiles. Well, we know the answer to that because we've already done it. There's about a billion-fold improvement in the energy efficiency of a logic operation since mainframe days. And of course, we went from a few thousand computers to billions of computers. We went from unmeasurable trivial quantities of energy used to do compute and communication to today, where a global compute cloud uses more energy than global aviation, and the former is growing faster than the latter. And we will again improve the efficiency of compute by another billion-fold, I think, as we go to the graphene paradigm, the paradigm, to follow with Bob, as we do, because we're not at physics limits yet with new materials, and that will increase the demand for electricity for compute. It won't eliminate demand, it will accelerate it. Nuclear power will play a role, because it can play a role, because it's the only phenomenology that's profoundly better than hydrocarbons. Wind and solar are profoundly worse in rough material terms, in terms of footprint of materials used, mining done, land used. Going from hydrocarbons to wind solar increases the footprint on the Earth by 1,000-fold. If you go from hydrocarbons to nuclear, you decrease your footprint to produce electricity by 1,000-fold. So obviously, markets will go nuclear, but that will provide nominally a third of the world's energy. All the materials processes need to make the magic materials to make everything possible require high temperature processes where hydrocarbons come in again. So the laws of physics eventually beat the aspirations
Sure.
of bureaucrats.